Okay, everyone. So I'm going to start with operations management. I'm going to share with you how this graphic organizer may help you in your revision, as well as the what to look out for in what to look out for and what to think about in operations management. As I mentioned many times before, when you are studying something in business and management, do not try to memorize, try to understand, so that you can transfer from one department of business to another department and see the relationship between the two. So, for example, operations management and marketing have a relationship. In fact, most businesses are orchestras, conductors in a certain sense, right? You must have different parts of the orchestra doing things in tempo with the rest of the other parts of the orchestra. You cannot have, for example, your choir ensemble, the alto singing on a different pitch and the soprano singing on a different tone or different tempo with the altos. So basically, everybody has to do the same thing, and everybody has to sing to the right direction and um, vision, right? Okay, so without further ado, let's look at it. So there we started operations management by looking at three types of sustainability, right? And then these three types are profit, planet, people, right? So without me elaborating on each of them, you will already notice how to elaborate on each of them. Again, if the case calls for a certain thing, then you will look at it. So just take note for people, it's not just about the employees' well-being, it's also about local cultures. How do they promote local cultures? How do they protect local cultures? How do they even protect the local way of life, for example? Or how do they contribute to the development of the community that they are in, the local community. So these are all under sociological sustainability, something to do with the people and the culture and the community, right? Is under social sustainability. All right, so what is bottom line? There's this term here. Okay, bottom line refers to the last line of the accounting statement. And in the last line of the accounting statement, there are some numbers there. So if the numbers are positive, it means that you have made profit. If the numbers are negative, you have made losses in the year. So in the past, most businesses just all investors and businesses focus only on the bottom line of profit and loss, right? So whenever they use the word bottom line, it means profit loss. Then, of course, with the word bottom, there's also the concept called top line. So what is top line? Top line is actually your revenue and sales for that year or for that quarter, depending on what the accounting statement, the timeline is, right? So let's say it's the annual report, all right, the annual accounting statement. So the revenue for the year is, let's say, a certain amount, let's say 1 million, and then the cost, let's say, is 600,000 added up. At the bottom, it will be 400,000 in profits. Okay, so this is what it means by top line, which is revenue and sales, and bottom line, which is profit and loss. Right? So these days, businesses do not just focus on profit and loss. Like I said, they focus on three different types of bottom lines, which are two of them are of course a bit more intangible in a certain sense, sometimes, right? All right. The next thing we look at in operations management are the methods of production. And you notice I actually created this particular box, which is factors to consider. So, um, right. So let's begin with why we think about the factors instead of talking about the different methods of production, no? Because the thing is that we don't, again, I said, don't think of methods of production linearly, like the different types of production methods and the differences, the pros and cons and things like that. It's not so much about that, because after a while you realize that they are quite easy to understand. Okay, just by the name itself, it should tell you something about it. But what is most important is why do why does a business actually choose a particular method of production? Why would you, if you're running a business, choose a particular method of production? That is the key part. Okay. All right. So first thing is that volume. So how much volume do you need in terms of the amount of finished products that you need? And of course, most of this volume is that you need is driven by market demand. You don't want to be producing something and this thing doesn't sell and it's just sitting on the shelves and just producing more and more of these things that are sitting on the shelf. So um, if there's market demand, and then you have to think about, okay, how do I create then the volume of production that I will require to meet this market demand before the competitors come in and take my market share. So then the next thing is you would also have, generally speaking, if you have higher volume, then you will also have certain cost savings because you're buying your bulk materials in bulk, your raw materials in bulk, and when you buy raw materials in bulk, generally speaking, you do enjoy cost savings and therefore economies of scale. Right. The next thing is customization and standardization. So customization and standardization, right, has an impact on branding. Okay, what does your brand represent? Does your brand represent standardized products, or does your brand represent that it is able to meet customers' needs, is can create personalization, individualization, basically it can cater to diverse customers' needs. Or if it's about standardization, let me give you a simple example. If you think about McDonald's highly standardized product. It is in every country you will enjoy the same taste of the Big Mac, McChicken, or even filet fish, the standardized menu. Even if you go to a McDonald's in Germany, you'll notice that you can recognize that McDonald's because the interior and the exterior is roughly similar to the one that you see in Singapore, for example. So this is what it means by standardization. And many companies in the world do value standardization because of different reasons. One of them is that if you have increased standardization, then your control in the production process tends to be more vigilant, and that leads to better quality management. So companies like Apple, for example, have very standardized products, and although they do allow for some form of customization, but overall their products are very standardized. You will actually know that if you are buying a Apple product in China, you if it's a genuine product, you know that you're getting the same Apple product even if you buy in India, Germany, USA, it's the same Apple product. There is no worries that you need to have, right? Because as long as it's a genuine Apple product, it does come from one source, Apple itself. Okay, so the next thing is capital and labor intensive production. Generally speaking, if you use a capital intensive production method, then your cost per unit is lower. Cost per unit means that the finished product, okay, how much does it cost to produce that product, each unit, right? Um, I won't go through this last point in detail because I think it's quite straightforward. Okay, rather I'll go through the production methods and then maybe you'll see how both worker morale as well as capital intensive and labor intensive comes into play. Okay, let's begin with job production. Okay, so job production is basically a production method that is usually a one-off production, right? So it could be things like design firms, architectural firms, even craft, for example. So depending on what you are producing. So for example, you are selling to another business. Let's say there's a construction company that engages you as an architect to actually design its next building. So you will give a design that generally speaking will be different from another design based on the needs of the customer, right? So there's high customization involved, all right? And notice the volume is usually, like I said, it's a job production, so usually it's just one off. However, if the manufacturer or if your architectural firm is very experienced and very skilled, then of course it will also have very good quality products that's being produced. Okay, as it is one off, the cost per unit is generally higher. So let me give you another example. Hermes, for example, the leather bags, they are all made by leather workers that they have. Okay, and these leather workers are highly skilled. To make a Hermes bag, you need to be apprenticed for even up to 7 years. Right, some of them, of course, are faster, maybe to 2 to 4 years. They are already qualified to make a bag on their own. But otherwise, you have to apprentice for almost 7 years before you can be given the responsibility to make a Hermes bag. Right, and there are many different levels of testing and assessments to make sure that you are of that standard to make the bag. As a result, okay, the cost that's produced for each bag is actually very much higher, right? So the Hermes, for example, do not outsource the production to actually low-skilled workers in less developed countries, just to get more volume. Okay, so their volume of the bags that they produce is also dependent on how many craftsmen they have and how fast or how efficient the production process for each craftsman is, right? So it really depends. So this is how, for example, um, companies can actually use a production method like job production. Okay. Oh, just to add on, if a bag is damaged, let's say you have a Hermes bag and it's damaged, you can return to Hermes, and Hermes will actually try to even locate the craftsman, to trace the craftsman that actually made the bag, so that the craftsman will actually try to repair the bag for you. Okay, so there is a sense of pride that each craftsman have, that this is the original maker and he will be the one who knows best about what this bag is, and he will try to make it. All right, or repair it. The next one, I'm not going to talk about cell. Cell only makes sense after mass production. Right, batch production. So batches are produced, right? So how do we think about this? Since it's Teacher's Day around the corner, so I will talk about how, for example, your cookies that you bake, right? So you bake chocolate chip cookies, or you bake PECAN cookies. So you when you are making those cookies, you notice that you make all the chocolate chip first, and then you make all the other PECAN cookie later, right? So there are different cookies that you make, but you make them in batches, right? You may have baked them all together, that's fine. But the idea is that when you are creating those cookies, you actually created them in batches. This is logical, right? Most people do this because why it's efficient, to just do this rather than you do one pecan cookie and one chocolate chip and one vanilla, and then you repeat one pecan, one chocolate chip, one vanilla. But actually, if you do all chocolate chip first and then you do all vanilla, it's actually easier and actually more efficient. So efficiency and logic will call for you to do batch production. All right. So batch production, all right, can be of course capital or labor intensive depending on what you have at your disposal to use. Depending on whether your product is also more labor related or can be replaced by machinery. Okay, so batch production is good because it's easy to maintain, easy to monitor, and of course you can control quality if these two are easier to do, right? It's also more cost effective because if there's any damage to the product, or if a particular batch of products is defective, you can just dispose of that batch and not the other batches, right? So for example, if you bake a batch of chocolate chip cookies but you bake them with too high temperature and they're burnt, or so you can just dispose of that batch. You don't have to worry that the other batches will be affected. Okay, so this is what it means by cost effective. Generally speaking, the cost per unit produced, of course, is lower than job production because you have a certain volume, right? But it's not as low as mass production or even flow production, which is the lowest in terms of economies of scale and cost savings. Okay, so mass and flow is basically producing identical products in volume, right? There's super high level of standardization. In fact, every product is the same as the other. Okay, so there's very limited customization involved. Okay, so you look at the cans, right? Like Coke can, Heaven and Earth can, they are roughly similar actually. It's just the flavors inside are different. Okay, so this is what it means because both came from Coca-Cola, right? So Coca-Cola maintained the standardization in the shape of the can, and or even the bottle if let's say there's a bottle. So mass production or flow production can be capital or labor intensive. Generally speaking, and this is the point that sometimes it happens, most production process may start with labor, and over time they are replaced by machinery once they realize that certain production process can be replaced by machinery, right, or technology. So factories may actually retrench their workers, the manufacturing workers, after some time when they realize that their roles can be replaced by machinery or technology, which goes back to this capital intensive or labor intensive production method. So why do people want to replace? Is because machinery are generally speaking more reliable in terms of the output, the quality and the consistency of the output of the finished product. Machinery also do not tire out. Yes, they require maintenance, but they do not tire out. Machinery has consistent productivity standards, right? And the other thing is that machinery actually can also lower the cost over time, okay? Because you just need to pay a one-time investment. But of course, if you retrench workers, then there will be an impact on your um, workers' well-being or community well-being, especially if you are employing a large segment of people within that local community to work for your factory. So sometimes retrenchment is not always the best thing. Okay, this is a good time to actually talk about the difference between mass and flow. Okay, the best way to think about flow production is to think of a river flowing, right? When a river flows, it doesn't stop. It, every day, every second, the river continues to flow. That's what it means by flow production, right? It only stops flowing when something happened within the flow. So, for example, if you throw a large rock or log, a piece of wood, into the river and stop the flow, then the flow will either become slower or it may even become choke, right? So this is the only time when a flow production method actually becomes so-called choke, right? If there's actually something that breaks down within the production process. Otherwise, flow production is 24/7, which means it produces 24 hours, 7 days a week. And if it's flow production, then you do require more capital intensive production because humans do tire over time, but machinery doesn't. All right. Next, um, generally speaking, for mass production method, the workers are trained for and only specialize in their production roles, which means that every day you come in, you do the same repetitive work. Over time, you become more efficient, and actually you can have a better eye for quality because of your specialization in your role. Okay. As such, there's also higher vigilance. The opposite word of vigilance is actually negligence. So in mass production method, there is high vigilance and emphasis on quality management. Why? Because if anything is defective, it is very difficult to trace in the manufacturing process as to where the defect may have come from or how many products of this are defective. So sometimes because it's so difficult to trace, they have to recall even maybe let's say 3 months of products that's produced within that particular 3 months all have to be disposed of because they do not know exactly which period it was that it was defective. So that's the problem with mass production if there's a defect, and it's worse if it's food related, so like pet food, baby milk product. So whenever there's something that's defective within the, and you hear in the news, right, food related type of defects, they will recall actually more than 1 week worth of food, right, that's being produced by the company. So they'll recall like even months, okay, because if they're unable to trace, then they'll play safe and they'll recall months of produce, uh, right. So basically, if there's negligence and the product is defective, that's what happens. So you must maintain high vigilance and quality management in a mass production process to avoid this problem, which is very costly. Imagine you can't sell, but you still have to pay your suppliers for all the raw materials that you use, and of course to pay your workers and maintain your machinery for all this production. All right. Mass production, of course, enjoys the lowest cost, enjoys the highest cost savings and the lowest cost in terms of each unit produced. Okay. The downsides are already mentioned. One of them is, of course, the if there's anything wrong in the process, it can become a very costly thing for the company. Of course, some other downsides are limited customization, right? High investment to set up mass production generally requires very high investment costs compared to other production methods. And this is the last part, is actually the key part in mass production, is that workers actually become very disengaged and have lower morale. So for example, if you have to come to school and do the repetitive thing over and over again, same thing every day, the next day you come and you do the same thing, you'll feel bored, you'll feel disengaged, you're just like, you'll feel even that, I'm just like a piece of machinery, there's no humanness in me. This is what happens in mass production. All right, and we're going to talk about this when we look at cell production. Over time, when people become bored, they no longer feel their autonomy. Their productivity level may drop over time, and if there's turnover, which means that the worker actually leave the company, then there's higher business costs to retrain workers for it. Okay, let's look at mass customization. All right, so mass production is producing identical. So this one produce customized products in volume, but the customization is actually somewhat still based on certain things. Okay, let me talk about this in detail. You notice there's high level of customization for the base product. Okay, but and there's allowance for customization of the base product, but there must be a base product to be that is standardized to be customized on. I'll give you a simple example. Recently I'm looking at iPad Pro, so there's iPad Pro 11, iPad Pro 12. These are two different base products. In the iPad Pro 12, there are different levels of customization. I can choose a higher hard disk drive all the way on to 1 terabyte, from 128 gig to 1 terabyte, or I could even choose a Wi-Fi only or Wi-Fi with cellular. So these are the amount of customization that is allowed on the base product. Some companies, for example, like Samsung, they have a wide variety of customization for different type of tablets, right? The size, everything. So again, it really depends from company to company. Like I said earlier, Apple is quite fixated on standardization. So you notice that even when they allow for customization, it is quite limited. But it is still considered mass customization in the sense that the factories can produce an iPad Pro 12.9 inch with 128 or 1 terabyte, depending on what the customer ordered. Right, next. Most of the time, mass customization is usually capital intensive already. Why? Before you can do mass customization, usually you have to fulfill mass production, right? To a certain extent that after a while you realize, hey, my customer needs are quite different, and therefore I need to tweak my mass production method to make it mass customization, to allow for customization of customers' needs. So by then, usually you will be able to, because you already have a mass production process in place, you will be able to actually just tweak part of the process and make it a mass customization. This is generally speaking. Of course, some companies can already produce a mass customization, but most of the time they will go through a mass production process, most of the time. All right. High vigilance. Okay, you notice this is repetitive point. High vigilance is a repeat point from mass production. So what does this tell you? This tells you one thing, that there are similar things in the production process, and some of the points can be used, right? So again, go with logic, don't go with memorization. Go with understanding and logic. With that, you can actually connect different production process and see similarities and differences more easily. So for example, cost effective is also similar, but there's a slight difference. If customization, of course, your cost per unit produced is higher, all right, as compared to mass production. Okay, the last thing is downsides. So the downsides, you notice, are also similar to mass and flow production. Why? Again, like I said, logic, right? It is the same issue at the end of the day for both production process. So don't go memorizing, go with understanding. That'll be good enough, right? Cell production. What is a cell? A cell is actually a group of people producing something together from start to finish. I repeat, from start to finish. So for example, the group is given all the parts of watchmaking, right? So then by the time the parts put together, by the time all the parts are put together, it will come out of that group or the cell as a finished watch. That means a watch that is working. Okay, so this is what happens within that cell. It's actually a response to the low worker engagement, low worker morale, the dehumanization of the worker. So what happens is that we want to increase human autonomy, freedom, the humanness of the respect for the human individual, and this is a production method that aims to actually increase engagement, human autonomy, motivation, morale, and things like this. So how do we do that? we do not just train the worker to specialize in limited production roles, but we train them for multi-role. That means they can do different things. So over time, for example, if I work in this cell, I will not just be able to put, let's say my original role was to put the hands in the watch, right? You know, the hour hand, the second hand, the minute hand. Over time, when I can do this well, I can even go on to other roles like how to fix the dial. Maybe I will go to the other role, how to fix in the gears of the watch and things like that. So over time, I know how to assemble a watch, even um, in different spaces of the cell or the room, right? Think of a room where everybody is just working together. So this multi-role also is good because if let's say somebody is let's say has a long hospitalization leave, let's say my colleague who do the dial has a long hospitalization leave, I can step up and take over that particular role or somebody take over my role, you know, and things like that. So this is what it means by multi-role production. We can cover for each other and the production process doesn't stop because somebody is absent. Okay, um, what is actually the key idea behind this? Number one, okay, the team itself is actually a group that actually works by right. They actually work well with each other because they stay together in the office space, of course, and they work together and they have certain respect for each other's skills and knowledge. So as a result of the human interaction, they have also good rapport. So the team manager, usually in a cell, is given autonomy to actually decide on certain things. So for example, they could even be given the autonomy and empowerment to decide on production targets, trainings, role rotations. So who gets to be trained, who gets to be rotated. All this can be done by the team manager in consultation with the team. So um, this is what it means by operating in a cell, each team is autonomous, so to speak, right? Remember, that increases the workers' engagement. So it's same thing for you guys. Let's look at school life. School life can be more engaging, more exciting if you are given responsibility, right? So if you are treated with more respect and you are empowered with more responsibility, you realize that you are more engaged, you are more motivated, although it's more challenging, correct? So this is how you have to transfer some of your own personal experience into some of these things that we're talking about and understand from an emotional point of view what it means by why people want to pursue a cell production method, although it doesn't provide that volume of production. I repeat, it doesn't provide that volume of production, but people actually do this. All right. Uh, you notice the next point, allows for customization. It means that there's opportunity for high levels of customization due to high levels, skill levels of the workers. So what does this mean? If you go back to job production, it means that, and you look at this line, good quality if manufacturer skill or experience. Same thing, right? With better skills, your workers can give better feedback. Your workers can actually provide new ideas about how the thing may look like. So that allows for customization. Okay. At the end of the day, same thing for job production, right? Remember the Hermes example. If let's say something goes wrong, it's also easier to trace, and it can even be brought back to the team or the cell to do that repair, right? Remember human pride in the production method or in creating that product. It can be given back to the original makers to actually do this. Um, it's always, like I said, it's not a cost-effective method as compared to mass production, but it does lead to higher worker morale and a more humanness of production. Okay, with that, it actually ends operation management. And if you notice, there are some key ideas here. Number one, the balance between reducing costs, right? Reducing costs and the morale of the workers. Okay, so you notice if I do mass production, yes, it reduces costs, but is my morale of my workers affected? Okay, and does this then have other implicit costs over time because of no training for new workers after they leave, or people starting to take more sick leave because they have lower productivity, lower motivation to do things. And of course, you think about it, and the second thing that I want you to take note of is actually this keyword called branding, right? Like I said, it although this operations management, there is an impact on marketing, right? So market demand is also about marketing. So when we want to, let's say like Coca-Cola, during festive season, they want to sell during festive season, they need to have the volume to be produced for the sales. They need to stock up for Christmas or for festivities, right? So this is what it means by being in sync with the other parts of the businesses. Okay? So with that, thank you very much, and I hope this has been quite clear to you guys.